All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Ironside Office Hours session. How are you doing, Bob?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing good. Not bad at all. All right, give me one second. Here we go. All right. If you're new here, I'm Paris Williams. I'm the MC for these bi-weekly office hour sessions, joined here with Bob Miller, the owner of Ironside IT Partners. Each session, we start with a brief topic and then we open the floor for Q&A. So feel free at any time to drop questions in the Q&A box below. I'll make sure that is open. You can also submit questions in advance through our website. They do not have to be related to today's topic, just any cybersecurity, IT related questions that you may have. Each session is also recorded and posted up to our YouTube channel, usually by the end of the day. So I'll make sure I put our YouTube channel link in the chat as well. And today's topic is when disaster strikes, how to handle an attack. Bob is going to be covering this session. So I will hand it over to you, Bob.
All right, thanks, Paris. Let me share my um, PowerPoint here, and then we'll get started. Okay, so when disaster strikes, how to handle an attack. So there we go. So disasters are incidents, but incidents aren't always disasters. It's one of those little quippy things like so a mountain is a hill, but a hill's not a mountain. And so not all incidents are created equal. Some of them really are disasters, and some of them are just not quite as bad. So let's talk about two different kinds of business email compromise. One kind, for example, happens to businesses all the time. And these are businesses that have good security protections in place. For example, they might be using an ITDR, which is an identity threat detection and response. And that's where your Microsoft 365 environment is monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for signs of business email compromise. So, in that case, an example of a business email compromise would be that one of your users accidentally logged into a service that was spoofing Microsoft 365. They gave their credentials away, a token was stolen, and now that token is used to access their Microsoft 365 email account from, say, Singapore or Germany or Russia or something like that. But then it's caught by the ITDR. The account is frozen and locked out. So that is just a minor incident. So that's one example. Another example of a business email compromise, this is the second kind, is when there is not an ITDR in place, nothing monitoring it to freeze the account. And that exact same scenario of events happens, except now that email account is being compromised, but nobody knows. And then from there, they can start to do a lot of different nefarious activities. Typically, what threat actors try to do is they create rules that will take emails from certain legitimate people, like, say, one of your customers or one of your vendors, and it will redirect those emails to deleted items or archive or something like this. And then it will take illegitimate emails from somebody spoofing that customer or that vendor and place it in your inbox and maybe kind of make it look legitimate. And from there, then they try to get the person, let's say somebody in billing or accounting or human resources, maybe, get them to do something that damages either your business or theirs. So if it's an accounting user, then perhaps they're trying to get the accounting person to wire money to a vendor, not it's really somebody posing as a vendor to send money to them. That's one example. And then when that happens, now we've got a legitimate disaster on our hands. So, and there are a lot of other things that can happen with business email compromise. There are certain ways to gain access to other email accounts from this particular email account. Say, let's say that this email account continues to be compromised. Now, this email account is used to take control of other email accounts inside your organization because emails coming from uh, John Williams at your organization that everybody knows will pass all tests. It doesn't even go out to the internet to come back in for the spam filter. It stays inside the organization. they know this user. And so they're much more likely to click on links from this user. Same thing with customers and vendors. It passes all sender reputation tests, keys like DKIM or DMARC or SBF, these types of things. When an email account is compromised, those don't do any good because your domain is registered as authoritative. Microsoft 365 is registered as authoritative for your domain, rather. And now emails coming from this user, John Williams, to customers and vendors goes right through the spam filter. And it can get them to do things like transfer money. So it can be ongoing and it can spread because it perhaps one of the other users in your organization or a customer or vendor, now they get that same Microsoft 365 login prompt that's spoofed. And now this threat actor has access to other of your employees as well as your customers and vendors. This is a growing, exploding disaster because now, because it was able to propagate through your Microsoft 365 tenant, now you've got some legal liability with that expanding threat. So, two kinds of business email compromise. The only difference between them is identity threat detection and response. So, that's not necessarily the focus of this webinar. We can do that at a different time if you like. Just simply ask. Um, but it does go into what we're talking about with disasters and incidents. Let me talk about another type of incident that can happen that is also a disaster, and that is a lateral movement leading to server takeover. This one's pretty common too. Not as common as business email compromise, but it happens quite a bit. And that's where somebody's computer, because of a spoofed email, or I'm sorry, phishing email, or some sort of spoofed login, or something like that. There are hundreds of ways for a threat actor to gain control of one of your employees' computers. And again, sort of like in the business email compromise for a Microsoft 365 tenant, if there's no MDR on your computers, then there's no analysis of the behavior that's happening on the computers. That can make all the difference in the world, just like for the Microsoft 365 tenants, identity threat detection and response makes all the difference in the world. So let's say that somebody gains access to one of your employees' computers. Again, there are hundreds of ways to do that. Once that access is gained, it could be, by the way, via SSL VPN. Highly suggest moving off of that if you're still using that. Just a little extra plug there. But regardless of how they gain access, once access is gained, that computer is on the network or connected remotely into the network. There are a lot of different ways that a threat actor can do what's called moving laterally. And that just means moving from here to here to here to here. And their goal is to get to a server. And once on a server, they can do privilege elevation, and then they can get administrator rights to the server. Again, if there's no MDR on the network, managed detection and response, then it's a lot easier. Also, if the server's unpatched, it's a lot easier. There's our previous office hours talking about the importance of keeping PCs and servers patched. So check that out on our YouTube channel for some more information about that. Highly recommend having patch management in place. So once the server has been taken over, then now the threat actor has complete control over the entire network. And that is an unmitigated disaster. That's one of the worst types of things that can happen, yet it happens all the time. So without MDR in place, managed detection and response, without that in place, a threat actor can continue to operate until an employee or somebody notices that something is a little bit off. Maybe the server's not responding as quickly, or maybe the server's just down because it's ransomware and the threat actor has encrypted the server and is holding it for ransom. A lot of different things, different ways that can go. Either way, all of these things are disasters. And most critically, they're really called incidents because an incident is something that happens regardless of how bad it is. An incident is something that happens on your network that you didn't plan as a result of a threat actor targeting you and doing something. So then the question is, how do we respond to those incidents? How do we handle those disasters? How do we contain the damage from an incident? Well, here's an example of these are examples of what you should do. for managing an incident. Number one, the first thing is you want to contain the threat. You want to identify where the threat is and attempt to contain it. Two, you want to assess the scope. How far do the tendrils of this threat actor's breach, how far do they go on the network? Number three, you want to activate your incident response plan. That's a plan that you've created in advance to know how to handle these types of situations, these scenarios. Number four, you want to preserve evidence. This is absolutely crucial. And it's something that's often overlooked, especially if you don't have an incident response plan, because preserving evidence is what will allow you to file a cybersecurity liability insurance claim. If you don't preserve the evidence, then there's nowhere for them to investigate and they might just deny it outright. Much less, depending on the size of your organization and the industry that you work in, you might have a legal obligation to preserve that evidence. You might also have a contractual obligation with customers and vendors. Then, fifth thing, eradication and recovery. Now is when you actually get to clean it up. Realize that there are several steps, major steps that happen before we even get to eradication and recovery. We have four major steps, large steps, before we even start to clean things up, before we even get rid of the bad guys. The bad guys are still on the network and in power. So before we do this, then finally, once we've eradicated the bad guys from the network and we've recovered, then we've got certain post-incident steps, clean up. How did they break in? How do we fix it? Lots and lots of things like that. So this is a typical incident response. Question is, how do you know what to do? Well, first of all, some key points about an incident response is that speed matters. So I think that makes sense, right? If the bad guy's on the network, you kind of want to get in and start dealing with things right away. In fact, a lot of people will want to go in and just start cleaning it up immediately, even without a plan, even without understanding the entire scope, which is the worst thing you can do. That's where speed isn't everything, because knowing what to do matters more than speed. Knowing what to do is absolutely critical. Speed's important, but knowing what to do matters a lot more. And doing exactly the right things in the right order, now that matters even more. So attending to it pretty quickly, super critical. Knowing what to do, even more critical. And then knowing the exact order and having everything in place and ready to go in advance matters the most. And that's where we come to developing an incident response plan. It is unbelievably critical for every organization, regardless of your size. Even if you are a one-man shop, or maybe you have 500 employees, doesn't matter. The employee count doesn't matter. Having an incident response plan is a necessity, in part because it's required by cybersecurity liability insurance policies. It's required from almost every single regulatory body that you might have to adhere to. And even if you don't have one to adhere to, maybe accountants have to deal with FTC safeguards. The people in the medical field need to deal with HIPAA. People working with the Department of Defense have to deal with CMMC. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of these. But even if you don't fall under any of those categories, there's still FTC Section 5A, which gives a bare minimum amount of what organizations are expected to do. And not doing those things poses some significant legal risk for you in the event that you have a breach. And guess what? You're going to have a breach. It is an absolute certainty that you will have a network breach. So it's just a matter of how do you handle it? And that's a little bit what we're talking about today is what is the plan of how we handle when a breach does occur? So here are the ingredients to develop your own incident response plan. Number one, you need to find roles and responsibility. That is all of the players who are involved in cleaning up an incident. They have to be identified and the roles handed out. They could be people inside your organization and with third-party vendors or partners such as an IT firm that you work with. Number two, incident identification and classification. It's identifying what type of incident's going on, which then breaks off a decision tree to how you handle it and classifying what that incident is. Three, this sounds either obvious or lame. I guarantee you it is not. It is a communication plan that is an unbelievably essential aspect of an incident response plan. It's knowing who do you communicate, how do you communicate, when do you communicate, and who do you communicate with. And so that comes into if you ever work with us, we talk about laying out your critical data assets. These are things your organization can't live without. And having your critical data assets identified in advance with the contact people, websites, support email addresses, things like that, that allows you to just quickly move through your incident response plan in advance. You've got that done and ready to go. Once you go to execute the plan, you just go because remember, speed matters. Number five, investigation and evidence handling. If there's anything to take away from this entire webinar, it is that. It is handling evidence because it's one of the things that gets destroyed. Think about a crime scene with a police officer. If there's a murder, something like that going on, if police officers come in and they don't secure the crime scene, they don't call in CSI, and their boot marks are trampling all over evidence, DNA, boot marks from the murderer, if they're grabbing the door handles with their bare hands, smudging it so that way there's no fingerprint that they can pull off of door handles, things like that. They've just destroyed the evidence. Even if they find the murderer, do they have the evidence to convict? Think of it like that. Handling the evidence is of utmost importance, and most likely required by the insurance company and any regulatory agency that you report to. Finally, eradication procedures. Again, like I mentioned in the previous slide, all this stuff has to be part of what you do in the incident response plan. And just now we're getting to cleaning things up. But you do need to have good procedures on how to actually clean things up. Number seven would be recovery process. And that's what you do once everything's cleaned up and you know the bad guys are off the network. Let's get things back online because we have a business to run and we've got to get the employees working because right now they're just twiddling their thumbs. So that's the recovery process. Finally, once things are recovered, you need to have a post-incident review, which is sitting down with any vendors that you have, such as a third-party IT firm, sitting down with internal employees and reviewing exactly what happened. Did anything break down? How did they get in? Things like that. Number nine, you want to update your documentation and any run books that you have for how to handle an incident response plan or how to handle aspects of your information technology plan. And then finally, what's your testing and training cadence? So once the incident response plan is updated, we got to test it. Like we can't have an incident response plan just sitting there written and just in a Word document on your server share that one is inaccessible if the server goes down, and two is only used once a year when you have to print it out and mail it into your cybersecurity insurance company because it's a meaningless document at that point. So it has to be tested and you have to have training for your users. So these are the ingredients for an incident response plan. Now, if you work with us, we help you develop this. We can take a lot of this load off of you. You can talk to us about this at any time if you aren't working with us on something like this. But these are the kinds of things we would step through if you work with us on creating an incident response plan. It can be pretty complex, and we do a lot to take that load off. We do a lot of that load for you and put it in place so that way you have a good plan that's solid and that works for you. Key thing about an incident response plan is it must be customized for your organization. There are certain things you can template, but for the most part, it's yours. It's your plan with your employees and your vendors and your own critical data assets. So that's what I got for today. Paris, do we have any questions that came in or
Yes, so
what do
we
we have?
actually have a couple that were submitted in advance using the form on our website.
Oh,
So the first one is about QuickBooks. For companies using QuickBooks, do you recommend a periodic review of connected apps and integrations as part of cybersecurity best practices? If so, what should be included in that review?
wow, that's a great question. It's a detailed question. So, we we do recommend looking at all of, so in this case, keeping this in the context of incident response planning, actually, because we can, QuickBooks is a critical data asset in your organization. And the things that QuickBooks connects to may also be critical data assets. They might not be, but they very well may be. And so we do recommend reviewing those for security, reviewing those to make sure that they have compliance with your insurance policies and regulatory agencies, like regulatory bodies that you have to follow. We do recommend. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of that question?
What should be included in that review? And they gave a couple examples:
Oh,
connected apps, user permissions, approval history, and data sharing access.
yeah, all of those. That's a really
Mhm.
good question. Um, so yeah, all of those should be included in that review. And but I think a key part of that is knowing what is it that we're really reviewing when we're looking at something like that, you know. So some of the key things that I would say when you're looking at those, what are you reviewing is what version are you on compared to what's the latest? Are the software patches being done on all of these? And you can't just simply install software patches, especially if you're dealing with QuickBooks, which is a very super standard connector. There are version differences and there's important distinctions there between the way that the connectors work on different version levels and with what other applications, because QuickBooks is such a gargantuan ecosystem of applications. So the versioning really matters. So you can't just simply apply patches and then expect things to continue to work. Um, I mean, they might work, but then they might not. And if they don't, now you're done. You know, now we've got a real situation on our hands. So that kind of stuff needs to be handled and managed well. Now, it kind of almost does require an internal run book on patching and updating this, and we're also reviewing it for security procedures. So I would say too that I actually could go on and on about this. This could be its entire office hours topic. So Paris, maybe if they mailed it in, if they're not here, or just reply back to them and let them know that this probably would be a longer conversation to have more germane to their specific
Sure.
situation.
All right, we have another question. How do we know if an attacker is actually gone from our environment?
That's a that's a really good question because the thing is, and I've said this many times on office hours, I say this in meetings all the time, it is an average of 206 days from when a threat actor breaks into a network to when you discover that that threat actor has broken into the network. So, you know, what you really want is to have reasonable certainty that what happened right now you've recovered from. And that comes through, let me back up through the slides here a little bit. That makes some of these things really important. Uh, Key among that, number four, is containment procedures, incident identification and classification. I also mentioned back here assessing the scope. These things are critical to knowing. So, you know, if there is a business email compromise going on, and that led ultimately to a computer being hijacked, and then that led to a lateral movement. You might fix the computer being hijacked. You might resolve the lateral movement on the server, and you might take a look at every single machine to look for behaviors, but you might not think to check the business email compromise because it might not occur to you to do that. So you're not always going to know. However, having really good, solid cybersecurity disciplines in place, having really good solutions tailored for your environment, sure, but there are some industry standard things that every organization needs. And among those is MDR, managed detection and response, and ITDR, identity threat detection and response. So that is bare minimum, bare minimum. And then you go from there. So those types of tools would continue to monitor and they would help you to assess what's going on because there's the other thing too. You could have this particular incident resolved and I know exactly how they got in and get that resolved, taken care of, and you could have an entirely different breach in progress and not know about it. So these tools are and having it them properly set up are critical. Critical.
When do you shut everything down versus trying to contain the attack?
Um, so the incident response plan should dictate that. first of all. Second of all, shutting everything down is not a great idea, but it might be something you have to do. Shutting it down means so if by shutting it down, we could be talking about different things. If we're talking about cutting power, you can't do that because you need electricity to diagnose and resolve the situation. If you're talking about removing internet access, that's very valid. You might need to do that, depending on what's going on, because part of the containment procedures might be stopping the bad guy from working. However, it seems counterintuitive, but do not do that until you've collected evidence, until you've assessed the scope, because sometimes you got to see the bad guy in there doing it. You've got to have evidence of that first. This is why having an incident response plan is critical because, knee-jerk reaction is, oh, bad guy, pull plug on internet. But that's not always what you need to do. Definitely not.
Okay, I have another one here. How soon do you have to let customers or the government know you've had an incident?
That depends on lots of different factors. That depends on the contract you have with customers. It depends on some regulations as well. Sometimes the cybersecurity liability insurance company, usually they want to know right away because a lot of times they want to get their own forensics team involved. You don't have to do that for a minor business email compromise where you've got ITDR in place and that threat gets immediately resolved. That's different. But when we're talking about like a lateral movement in that example earlier, that's that one you might need to get the cybersecurity insurance company involved. So the answer is depends, and that's where writing your own incident response plan is critical because and keeping it updated is critical because then um, that because that's based on lots of different unique factors in your organization, like contracts.
If we have good backups, are we basically okay?
No, I mean the good backup. Well, so good backups. If by good backups we mean they are immutable, that it's backed up to the cloud, and the backup cannot be edited. That's crucial. If you get backup from us, that's how it is. There's a significant amount of backups that's not how they are. So check with us, and we'll let you know whether it's from us. If it's from us, it is. But if it's not from us, we can help you evaluate whether it is or not. Um, and sometimes the backup you have might be fine, but you might need a few check boxes to make sure it's immutable. That's critical. Immutable means unchanging, cannot be changed. It means that once the backup is there, it can't be deleted, edited, modified in any way. It can only ever be restored back down to you. And an ungodly amount of backups are not set up that way. If you are doing backups to your own hard drive, to portable USB hard drives, it's not immutable. A threat actor can get there, and when you go to swap drives out, they can delete things. A lot of online backups also not immutable because a lot of them are just synchronizations and they can be edited. But even if you have an immutable backup, there's still tons of risk because there's still time to restore everything. And that restoration process can take days, weeks, a month, depends on the size of your company. And some of those things, that length of time could put you out of business. So it's critical. The backup should be the option of very last resort. It's the thing that if everything else fails, at least we have our backups. So make sure they're immutable. If your backup that's literally what it takes to save your company, you've got it. But do everything to avoid needing that to save your company because it will harm your company to have to go that route. So it's not it's the barest of safety nets, the barest. There needs to be a lot of layers of safety above that because having your company down for that amount of time is can be pretty awful.
What should we do to train employees when something seems off?
Uh, yeah, well, I mean, so you can have a security awareness training program, always good, super important. It keeps probably more than the individual training itself, it keeps security front and center on their minds. And have your company culture reflect that you are a security aware organization, meaning that um, we know that there are threats out there. They're targeting you my employee. They're targeting me as the IT person. They're targeting me as the owner. They're targeting they're targeting everybody, the organization at large. So it's a concerted effort among all of us to keep us all safe individually and organizationally. So security awareness training helps with that. The biggest thing is that culture, though, is developing that culture internally that these are the threats, these are the realities. Keep the doors locked, the windows locked, keep us safe on the inside. Let's follow some good basic procedures. And if something seems weird, just let us know. Just like if you're at an airport and somebody leaves a paper rolled up, crumpled up paper bag behind, you're going to let TSA know. If you can find a TSA agent, since we have so many, since it's shut down right now, but that's a whole different webinar we could do. But anyway, it's sort of like that. Just if something seems off, tell us. Just tell your manager, IT person, somebody, let somebody know.
Oh, we just got one more question.
Yeah.
How much does it cost to make an incident response plan?
So it really depends on lots of different factors. So if you are, well, for example, if you're a one person company versus a 500-person company, significant difference in what you have to do and what those steps are. A one person company might have a very brief one because it's your own company. Um, versus 500 employees, there you're going to have a dozen people internally involved in that plan. So, there's a lot to coordinate, a lot of testing and things like that. So it really is very, very situational. For most of our IT and our cybersecurity clients, we include an incident response plan. We bundle it into other services. And then that plan we help them to create. It usually takes a few weeks. And then once created, it's created. And then we help you set up a cadence for testing and different things like that. But that's usually bundled in. Developing one, it's really highly specific to you. It can range from I mean, you imagine what the range is of a 500 employee organization would be astronomically more expensive than a one person organization, and that would be insanely cheap compared to the others. So it really does run the gamut. Also, there are other factors as well. What is your do you have a fiduciary responsibility? Do you have responsibility to the cyber liability insurance company? What are those responsibilities? Do you have regulatory responsibilities? Do you have to report, just is it simply FTC safeguards as I mentioned, or is there CMMC? All of those things, those are a mile apart from each other as far as requirements. CMMC meaning that you work with the Department of Defense on some capacity. So it really, I hate to answer that question. I'm not evading. But legitimately, it is highly situational. It can go from doesn't have to be that expensive to, very expensive depending on what the size of your company is. So, I maybe let them know, Paris. Well, they're probably listening right now. Reach out to me, and then we can talk about that specifically. Most small and medium businesses, though, can do it pretty inexpensively. It doesn't have to be an expensive prospect. And again, we do it. We work on it all the time with clients, and we've got a lot of work already done for them. So makes it not as bad because depending on the regulatory requirements that they have, things like that. We have some of the most common ones ready to go that companies under 100 employees or under 200 employees would need to use. So again, we can talk about that online or offline rather. That might be a better place for that.
It looks like that was our last question.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Thanks for all of the good questions today, everybody. Our next session is going to be on April 8th. You can join using the same link you used today. Also, a reminder that you can submit topic ideas, anything you want us to cover, and any questions on that form on our website. And feel free to send the Zoom link to anyone you think would benefit from attending these sessions, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Bye, everybody.